Hello and welcome to yet another episode of The Week Gone By. As South Asians prepare for a fresh start in the coming week, we here will give you one last reminder of what you left behind in the week that went by. So here's what we have for you in this week. It's another setback for Nepal. Lawmakers once again failed to deliver as deadline for drafting new constitution ends. Staring at a constitutional crisis, people now ask, when will it all end? Enough is enough. That's the message from Afghan President Hamid Karzai to NATO. But amid rising pressure within, the question is whether it's just mere posturing or does the president have the means to pursue his threat? Another black episode unfolds in Pakistan. Missing journalist Salim Shahzad pays the price for reporting the truth. Found dead near Islamabad. Activists allege foul play by the ISI. It's a landmark decision in Bangladesh. Government decides to scrap caretaker government system in the country. Opposition BNP calls Hartal in protest. High drama in India over the Lokpal bill. Differences crop up between the government and the civil society. Spiritual leader Baba Ramdev too jumps into the fray with threats of a hunger strike. The celebration of the Fourth Republic Day in Nepal last Sunday should have been marked by joy and a sense of fulfillment. Instead, there was mounting public anger and frustration as the country's parliament failed yet again to deliver a new constitution in time. After weeks of political uncertainty in Nepal, the term of the Constituent Assembly was finally extended by 3 months. The legislature parliament passed the 9th amendment to the interim constitution on Sunday morning to extend the term. The parliament has changed the phrase in Article 64 of the interim constitution, which previously mentioned that the term of the Constituent Assembly will be 3 years from the date of its first meeting. The new phrase now says that the term of the CA will be 3 years and 3 months from the date of its first meeting. The Constituent Assembly term extension followed a 5-point agreement among the 3 main political parties, the Maoists, the Nepali Congress and the UML. Although the Madhesi Front had initially given consent, it remained neutral during the time of voting. Nepal's parliament was elected in 2008 with a 2-year mandate to fulfill the terms of the peace agreement that followed a long civil war and also write a new constitution for the world's youngest republic. However, it has been unable to complete either of the tasks. This despite a 1-year extension in 2010. On Saturday, the extended term too expired, leaving the country in a legal vacuum. The widespread hope that followed the end of the war in 2006 has now been replaced by a growing sense of anger and frustration in this tiny Himalayan nation. It's back to square one in Nepal. Once again, the country's lawmakers failed to live up to the people's expectations. The one single promise of a new constitution. One that will lead Nepal to the path of progress after a decade-long struggle for democracy. But politicians in Nepal successfully lived up to their infamous reputation of irresponsible politics by keeping individual party interest before the nation, and thus guaranteeing further uncertain days for the Himalayan nation.
This is a monumental change which happens once in generations, where you are transforming the country from a monarchy to a republic, from a unitary state to a federal state, changing the notion of nationalism. And then if you're just calculating your party interests, then you're bound to fail.
The country had elected a parliament in 2008 with a 2-year mandate to fulfill the terms of the peace agreement that followed a long civil war, and also finished drafting a new constitution for the world's youngest republic. However, the elected lawmakers failed to complete either of the tasks. This despite being given a year's extension in 2010.
Expressions of disillusionment against politicians is a sign that there's a degree of discontent with the process as it is. So I think that members of the CA now actually do need to demonstrate progress, possibly even by making public a partial draft of the Constitution, starting public consultations on it.
In the past few months, there has been frantic attempts to forge consensus among political parties. And with the Constituent Assembly's deadline nearing, there were desperate calls for another extension. The tenure of the Constituent Assembly needed to be extended by amending the interim constitution to give lawmakers more time to draft the constitution and complete the peace process.
I think it's all 601 to blame, which is a bit misleading. For example, we have 11 thematic committees, and 10 thematic committees completed our task before the schedule, way before 1 year.
But there is anger on the streets of Kathmandu. People feel betrayed, and they now demand an explanation.
The government doesn't have the full authority and also the full strength. I think we can't just depend on the government. The people have to come out.
Constitution members, they have taken the wages, but the Constitution is not coming out. They are further planning to extend the date, and we want our Constitution.
The interim constitution states that the Constituent Assembly's tenure can be extended by a simple majority in case of a state of emergency, or else it requires 2/3 support from the 601-member House for extension through an amendment. Nepal's parliament was to have promulgated a new constitution by May 28 midnight, when the interim constitution was to expire. But unable to give the country a new constitution, Prime Minister Khanal sought to amend the interim constitution, that too for the 9th time in 3 years. The Prime Minister had promised to complete both the tasks once he took over as Prime Minister in February this year. But fierce power struggle among the 3 major parties has repeatedly stalled the entire process. Perhaps it's payback time for the Communist Prime Minister. He had sacrificed his ally, the Nepali Congress, and signed a secret deal with the UCP and Maoist to lead the government. But the Nepali Congress remained steadfast in its opposition against another extension. It demanded that the Maoist, now an ally of the ruling UML, must dispose of its arms to the government. Finally, the tables were turned on the Prime Minister in a Macbeth-like midnight drama on Sunday, as the Maoists sacrificed the Prime Minister for the sake of their guerrilla army and its weapons. Faced with intense opposition from the Nepali Congress and the Madhesi parties, the UML leader had to give in to the opposition demands. Not that he had too many options. Thus came another political agreement. This time, a 5-point pact between opposition Nepali Congress and the ruling coalition of UML and the Maoists. And most significantly, with a pledge from the Prime Minister that he will step down once the process was over. As per the new agreement, not only the first draft of the new constitution must be ready by then, the peace process too shall have to be complete in 3 months' time. Though one constitutional crisis has been averted for now, Nepal faces an even greater challenge in the coming 3 months. The Nepali Congress and Madhesi parties say Prime Minister Khanal should resign at the earliest, paving way for a national consensus government. But last year's tiresome 17 rounds of prime ministerial election only serve us a bitter reminder. Meanwhile, even as the opposition Nepali Congress remained steadfast in its demand, Prime Minister Jhalanath Khanal has clarified that he will not resign until a national unity government is formed in Nepal. Also, he has not given any time frame. Remember, one crucial point in the new agreement says that the Prime Minister must resign, paving way for a national unity government. Meanwhile, United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon too has welcomed the agreement reached by the parties in Nepal to extend the Constituent Assembly term. In a statement, the United Nations chief urged the Nepali leadership to bring the peace process to a successful conclusion very soon. Let's now shift focus to Afghanistan. Now, at a time when there is massive public outrage against the deaths of innocent civilians in NATO airstrikes in Afghanistan, President Hamid Karzai on Tuesday warned that the forces risked of being seen as an occupying force rather than an ally. Karzai even threatened of unilateral action if the strikes did not stop. However, the question that now rises, is this a mere posturing or does he have the means to execute his threat?
The Afghan people can no longer tolerate these attacks on their homes. The Afghan government will be forced, if you do not come to an understanding with us based on a negotiated solution to this, that the Afghan government will be forced to take a unilateral action in this regard.
Rare strong words from the man who many think has long been the US's trusted man in the country. But with mounting pressure within, the Afghan president had no option but to up the ante against the coalition strikes in the war-torn nation. There is growing anger and resentment among the poor citizens. In the past 1 week alone, more than a dozen civilians have died in NATO airstrikes targeted at Taliban hideouts. The NATO-led International Assistance Force, however, insists that it does all it can to limit deaths of innocent Afghans in the raids, most of which are carried out at night. Soon after NATO's misadventure came a swift apology. It admitted killing 9 civilians in the Nowzad district on Saturday. Afghan officials, though, put the figure at 14, including 12 children. In what it termed as an heartfelt apology, NATO commander in southwestern Afghanistan, General John Doolan, said, "The coalition takes every civilian injury or death extremely seriously. It is our top priority to prevent civilian casualties, and we continue to improve our practices and strive to prevent these types of incidents from happening further." The airstrikes have caused intense friction between the Karzai administration and NATO-led international forces. NATO commanders have in fact accused the Afghan president of stirring up resentment as a populist ploy. Karzai even went on to add that NATO risked becoming an occupying force in the country if such aerial strikes continued. Taking a dig at neighboring Pakistan too, Karzai said that the war on terrorism should be fought in that country where insurgents had their bases rather than in Afghanistan. The Afghan president's outspoken comments have now prompted a public standoff with the coalition forces, but NATO insists that the air attacks continues to be necessary. Analysts have accused Karzai of political posturing and even questioned his ability to dictate tactics. Previously too, he has made such strong condemnations, only to step down later. According to a recent UN estimate, 440 Afghan civilians have been killed by NATO or Afghan forces in 2010 alone. Incidents of jets and helicopters mistakenly killing civilians have caused deep resentment among the civilians. But troops insist air power is one of their key advantages over the insurgents. In fact, orders to limit airstrikes from General Stanley McChrystal, the former coalition commander, were highly unpopular with soldiers on the ground. Thus, they had raised objections complaining that their lives were put at increased risk and that they were being dangerously constrained. Even though Karzai has frequently berated the coalition forces for causing civilian casualties, he is completely reliant on coalition arms and money to maintain even a superficial control over his war-ravaged country. Thus, experts say, neither is this the first warning and nor will it be the last. Thus, facing flak from within, Karzai has no other option but to raise his voice, a futile attempt to woo some support back simply because he doesn't have the possibilities or means to enact his threat. And in neighboring Pakistan, there was fresh drama on Monday when a new report emerged in the country's media. There were reports in the media that Pakistan will launch a military offensive in North Waziristan very soon. This comes just days after US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton reiterated that Pakistan must tackle Al-Qaeda and Taliban sanctuaries on the Afghan border. The report also claimed that an understanding to this effect was reached when Clinton and US Joint Chiefs of Staff Admiral Mike Mullen visited Pakistan last week. The US has long demanded that Pakistan attack the region to eliminate the Haqqani network operating out of the belt. But Pakistan has been reluctant till it came under enhanced international scrutiny post the Bin Laden episode. Pakistani Daily, the news quoted unidentified but highly placed sources as saying that the Pakistan Air Force would soften up militant targets under the targeted military offensive before ground operations were launched. that a strategy for action in North Waziristan has already been drawn up and an understanding developed during the Clintons' recent visit. It also reported that the joint operation with the allies was also discussed, but no decision had been taken because the matter is extremely sensitive. In case the two sides agree to go for a joint action, it would be the first time in the present war on militancy that foreign boots will get a chance to be on Pakistani soil with the consent of the host country. Many say it could be highly risky for the Pakistani generals. And adding fuel to the speculation, US Admiral Mike Mullen too on Monday said that the Pakistani government was planning a major offensive in North Waziristan. He was speaking to an American television network, and this is what he had to say.
It's been reported that you gave the Pakistanis a list of targets in the Haqqani network and al-Qaeda that you expect them to pursue. Did they promise to do that?
Well, actually, George, it was a good meeting. I think the level of intensity that's been reported was a little bit overstated. I think we were very frank with them, and they were very frank with us. I did hear from the military leadership their continued commitment to look ahead and work with us, and we think that's important.
Now, the United States and Pakistan have been engaged in a diplomatic stare-down since the May 2nd raid on Bin Laden compound in Pakistan. Pakistan was outraged over the unilateral action as an affront to its sovereignty, and Americans were angry that Bin Laden was hiding for more than 5 years in a military town just 35 miles from Islamabad. However, after a series of visits by high-profile US officials, including Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, there seems to be a turnaround now. The two partners have now announced the formation of a joint intelligence team on counter-terrorism, one that will go after 5 top targets, including second in rang after Bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, Al-Qaeda Operations Chief Atiyah Abdul Rahman, as well as Taliban leader Mullah Umar. Another target is Siraj Haqqani, leader of the Haqqani tribe in Pakistan's lawless tribal belt. US intelligence officials say their top commanders live openly in Pakistani city of Miran Shah, close to Pakistani army outposts. However, Pakistani officials have maintained that the US had never provided them accurate intelligence about the Haqqani leadership's exact location. The other big story in Pakistan, well-known Pakistani journalist Salim Shehzad, who went missing last Sunday, was found dead this Tuesday. According to the police, Shehzad's body was recovered from a canal in Mandi Bahauddin in Pakistan's northern Gujarat district. It was feared that he was abducted over the weekend in an upscale neighborhood of capital Islamabad. His friends say Shehzad has been receiving repeated threats from Pakistan's premier intelligence agency. Shehzad's death has sparked widespread protest and condemnation and has raised questions about the freedom of the media to report the truth in Pakistan. Salim Shehzad paid the price for reporting the truth. Indeed, it is for people like Shehzad that all of us in South Asia can dream of a better future. Shehzad is just the latest entry into that long list of brave men in Pakistan fighting hard for a just, open and democratic society that a vast and silent majority have long been crying for. The question is, will their cry be heard, or will more voices like Shehzad's be silenced? Media is often called the fourth pillar of democracy. In normal circumstances, though, we hardly feel its real impact. In the clutter of sensational and mindless reportage, we tend to forget the real might of the pen. Until people like Sayyid Salim Shehzad serve us a stark reminder. Shehzad, who wrote extensively on Islamist groups, went missing last Sunday. The 40-year-old father of 3 vanished after leaving home in Islamabad to appear on a television talk show.
Unidentified people on Sunday when he was on his way to office of a private news channel. Earlier today, Shehzad's car was found in Sarai Alamgir along with his body.
On Tuesday, his body was found in a canal in Mandi Bahauddin area of Punjab province, 120 kilometers southeast of Islamabad. Shehzad, a correspondent of Hong Kong-based Asia Times Online, had recently written an article about Al-Qaeda infiltrating into the Pakistan Navy. Something that people say may have cost him his life now.
He was being an extremely critical writer, especially his writings in Asia Times, was not liked by many circles, especially power corridors.
An editorial in the Daily Times the next morning has said, "It is a sad day, a black day, that a journalist was picked up from the capital and his tortured body dumped in another town while the perpetrators of this gory crime roam free." Journalists across Pakistan have condemned Shehzad's killing.
Evidence to circumstantial, I will again repeat, points towards security agencies.
The government of Pakistan to accept and understand that there is reasonable suspicion being cast upon the state in this instance, and they should make every effort to clarify the situation.
Indeed, he was one brave person of their tribe who made a career writing about the various Islamist militant networks operating in Pakistan and warned human rights campaigners before his disappearance that he had been threatened by the Inter-Services Intelligence or ISI. Shehzad is widely believed to have been seized by intelligence officials for alleging that terrorists attacked a major naval base in Karachi on May 22nd after the Navy refused to free sailors held for suspected militant links. The same editorial in Daily Times has also mentioned that this was not the first time that the journalist had lost life for honest reportage in the country. True, in the past few months, Pakistan has witnessed deaths of many brave journalists, especially in Balochistan, Fatah and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Going on to describe the community as being between the devil and the deep sea, the paper wrote, "Journalists in Pakistan are between a rock and a hard place. They face threats both from militants and our intelligence agencies. When journalists write or speak against terrorists, they receive threats. When they expose our military links with terrorists, they are harassed." As Shehzad's body was being taken for funeral on Wednesday, the clear signs of torture on his body perhaps spoke of the state in which journalists in the country are trying to discharge their responsibility. Pakistan is the world's most dangerous place for scribes. Paris-based monitoring group Reporters Sans Borders say 14 journalists have been killed in the past 13 months alone. Threats, harassment, abduction and even murder is what journalists in Pakistan are victims of, all too frequently. Shehzad had informed many he knew that he continued receiving threatening calls and was being followed constantly. Thus, Shehzad's latest episode is just another reminder that if the people of Pakistan do not wake up and speak out against such brutalities, every sane voice in the country will die a silent death.
Before they're forever banned, the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
And amid rising condemnation, Pakistan's intelligence service ISI made a rare public statement on Tuesday denying any involvement in the murder of journalist Salim Shehzad. The ISI said that any suggestion that it had a role in Shehzad's murder was baseless and unfounded. In the meantime, Pakistani security officials have detained a former Navy commando and his brother in connection with last week's militant attack on a Karachi naval air base. Kamran Ahmed, who was sacked from the Navy 10 years ago, and his younger brother Zaman was picked up from Lahore on Friday, 5 days after the attack on the air base that killed at least 10 military personnel. Kamran Ahmed had served at the Mehran Air Base and was court-martialed for assaulting a senior officer. The military court had declared him mentally unfit for the job. He was also under suspicion after a suicide attack on the Naval War College in Lahore in 2008. Now, even as the 2611 trial continues in a Chicago court, there was an interesting twist in the tale this week. It seems like the man whose name has come up time and again during the course of the investigation has once again put the Pakistani administration in a spot of bother. Just the other day, David Headley's sensational testimony that Jamaat-ud-Dawa chief Hafiz Saeed had motivated him for jihad had caused a considerable amount of embarrassment to Pakistan. And this week, the government's dichotomy was clear when it told the court that it could not defend the Jamaat-ud-Dawa chief in the US lawsuit. He has always been Achilles' heel for the Pakistan establishment. Jamaat-ud-Dawa chief Hafiz Muhammad Saeed, the man whom the world blames for being the mastermind behind the Mumbai terror attacks. A charge that has now gained substance after David Headley's sensational revelations in a Chicago court. But Pakistan has all along begged to differ, letting Saeed roam free in the country given a potent shield by what it calls its independent judiciary. But now it is in a spot of bother. Not sure how exactly should it deal with this infamous religious leader. In an interesting new development, on Monday, the government informed the court that it could not defend Hafiz Muhammad Saeed in a US lawsuit filed by relatives of 2 Jewish victims of the 2008 Mumbai terror attacks, following which the US court had issued summons to Saeed, the current and a former head of the Inter-Services Intelligence, and several other persons who were named in the lawsuit. In a written reply submitted on behalf of the Foreign Ministry to Justice Umar Atta Bandial of the Lahore High Court, Deputy Attorney General Naseem Kashmiri said, "The Jamaat-ud-Dawa or its chief are not part of the government. Therefore, the government cannot provide legal assistance to him or his organization." After examining the government's response, the judge has asked Saeed's counsel A.K. Dugar to present the law under which the court could direct the government to defend a private individual in a US court. Dugar then sought time to prepare his arguments. The hearing has now been adjourned till June 30th. The US lawsuit has accused Lashkar-e-Taiba leader Hafiz Saeed, Commander Zakir Rahman Lakhvi, Azam Chima and Sajid Majid, former ISI chief Nadeem Taj, its incumbent head Lieutenant General Ahmed Shuja Pasha and 2 others for providing material support for the Mumbai attacks. For each of the 9 claims, the plaintiffs have also sought damages worth $75,000 US. Saeed on his part has denied all links with the Lashkar-e-Taiba, saying that he was only heading the Jamaat-ud-Dawa, which he claims is a religious charitable organization. Therefore, he contended that the Pakistan government should defend him in the lawsuit in the same manner that it was protecting the ISI chief and other officials. And talking of India and Pakistan, the 2 countries this week inched a little forward in their talks on Siachen as the Defence Secretary level talks concluded in New Delhi on Tuesday. Both the nations welcomed the dialogue, calling it frank and cordial, but a breakthrough on the long-pending issue is still nowhere in sight.
Indo-Pak talks on the Siachen issue kicked off in New Delhi on Monday, after a gap of 4 years. The Defence Secretaries of India and Pakistan led their delegations for the 12th round of talks on the military positions around the glacier. However, the neighbours failed to reach a consensus on the long-pending issue. Siachen, regarded as the world's highest battlefield, is believed to be of vital, strategic and diplomatic value. The 2 countries agreed to a ceasefire deal over the glacier in 2003 but have yet to agree on how to withdraw troops. Talks have been deadlocked over India's demand that existing troops' positions on the glacier be clearly marked on maps. Pakistan believes that would imply recognition of India's claims to the glacier. As the delegations led by Indian Defence Secretary Pradeep Kumar went into the talks with the Pakistani team, led by his counterpart, Lieutenant General retired Syed Athar Ali, the positions continued to be where they were at the end of the 11th round of talks. There was no mention of any progress towards resolution of boundary demarcation on Siachen. However, a joint statement was released welcoming the dialogue, and it was announced that the talks will continue in the next round to be held in Islamabad. But will the next round see a breakthrough? Or will it be mired in reservations as it was this time? Ahead of this round of talks, Indian Defence Minister A.K. Antony had voiced his doubts.
India's grievance with Pakistan is that about 42 terrorist camps are functioning in the country. Without destroying these terrorist camps, it would be difficult to have permanent cooperation in Indo-Pak relations.
Relations between the nuclear-armed neighbours hit a low after the 26/11 Mumbai attacks that left 166 people dead. Even though the Prime Ministers of India and Pakistan decided to resume the talks last year, there have been a slew of incidents hindering the repair work. If not the knowledge of Al-Qaeda leader Bin Laden's hideout in Pakistani soil, then Lashkar operative David Coleman Henley's ISI link, India stresses now that Islamabad has to be demonstrative in acting against terrorists. Till then, substantive progress in Indo-Pak talks may remain a chimera.
On that note, we'll slip into a short break, but lots more coming up on the other side. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back after the break. Let's continue with the journey. In India, the drama over the Lokpal bill continues. With each passing day, there seems to be a new twist in the tale. The latest, spiritual leader Baba Ramdev's threat to go on a hunger strike if the government does not give in to his demands over the same. Anuradha has been tracking the story very closely. She will tell us where exactly is this new episode heading.
Thank you, Indro. As you rightly pointed out, the Lokpal bill has now become quite a sticky point for the Indian government. Fresh differences have cropped up between the civil society members and the government over the jurisdiction of the Lokpal. Now, the government on one hand does not want the Prime Minister's office to come under its purview. The civil society members, whereas, are quite adamant. And to top it all, there is the added confusion with spiritual leader Baba Ramdev staging a hunger strike in the capital, New Delhi. The government did try to persuade Ramdev from his plans, but it did not work as Ramdev remained quite adamant. Finally, in a late-night drama, police had to evict the spiritual leader and his supporters from the venue. Now remember, there were several rounds of talks on Saturday itself, followed by reports that a compromise had been reached, but Ramdev refused to budge, thus prompting government action. Close to 600 policemen arrived at Ramlila Maidan late on Saturday night and asked the crowd of 60,000 supporters to disperse. But what followed next was nothing short of a circus.
Now, there are many who have criticized both the parties in this entire saga. While many have termed Ramdev's moves as being juvenile and impractical, they have also criticized the government for the bias in its response. They say as soon as a popular spiritual leader threatens to go on his much-hyped satyagraha and the media too jumps into the circus, the government presses its panic button, while Iram Sharmila continues her fast until death silently, and the government simply refuses to respond to the issue of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act.
How shall I explain it? This is not a punishment. I think this is my bounden duty at my best level.
Courage is not something that comes flying into our heart in moments of need and emergency. Courage is not something that can be handed over to you through lessons either. For some, courage is a way of life, and for someone like Iram Sharmila, it is what keeps her alive. Perhaps while describing her, the two words courage and resolve cease to exist independently. It is one definite identity that symbolizes Sharmila, the Iron Lady of Manipur. And as one walks the dingy confines of the security ward of Jain Hospital in Imphal, one comes face to face with an extraordinary story, one which is unparalleled in the history of political protest anywhere in the world ever. Yet, you have been oblivious of it. 100 television channels, an unprecedented age of media, yet we know very little about it. That's when the enormous story of Iram Sharmila begins to seep in. At 38, this Manipuri woman has not eaten anything or drunk a single drop of water for 10 years. Yes, 10 long and eventful years. she has been forcibly kept alive by a drip thrust down her nose by the state. For 10 years, nothing solid has entered her body. Not even a drop of water has touched her lips. She has not combed her hair, she cleans her teeth with dry cotton and her lips with dry spirit, so she will not sully her fast. Her body is wasted inside. Her menstrual cycles have stopped, yet she is resolute. Whenever she can, she removes the tube from her nose. It is a bounden duty, she says, to make her voice heard in the most reasonable and peaceful way. For young Sharmila, things came to a head on November 2, 2000. A day earlier, an insurgent group had bombed an army column. Enraged by the act, the 8th Assam Rifles retaliated by gunning down 10 innocent civilians at a bus stand in Malum in Imphal. The local papers published brutal pictures of bodies the very next day, including one of a 62-year-old woman, Lei Sangbam Ibetomi, and 18-year-old Sinam Chandramani, a 1988 National Child Bravery Award winner, extraordinarily stirred. On November 4th, Iram Sharmila began her fast, protesting the atrocity and demanding repeal of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act from Manipur.
I was endured, I was contented.
A draconian act which gives extraordinary powers to the army in trouble-torn areas. The act allows the army to use force, shoot or arrest anyone without warrant. It further prohibits any legal or judicial proceeding against any army personnel without the previous sanction of the central government. Just 2 days into her fast, Sharmila was arrested on charges of trying to commit suicide. Since then, authorities have been detaining her persistently, only to release her at the end of every year. However, instead of going home, she continues with her fast relentlessly, leaving the authorities with no other option but to re-arrest her within 48 hours. The room at JN Hospital in Imphal has literally taken the shape of a sub-jail for lodging her. Perhaps a failed attempt to suppress a spirit that is as indomitable as hers, because even the iron bars that detain her is not stout enough before the strength of her resolve.
Unlimited courage. That is why I am still alive.
Bureau Report, TV South Asia. In the meantime, Indian Home Minister and member of the Lokpal Joint Drafting Committee P. Chidambaram on Tuesday said that there was no unanimity among civil society members over the issue of bringing the office of the Prime Minister, higher judiciary and conduct of parliamentarians in the purview of the Lokpal Bill. However, the government said that the meeting of the joint committee that took place on Monday was constructive.
On these issues, there was no unanimity either among members of civil society or those who have written about the subject or those who have spoken on the subject. And therefore, these are matters in which we need to consult, firstly, the political parties, and secondly, the state governments.
On Tuesday, however, the government also wrote to the states and political parties seeking views on the structure of the proposed Lokpal Bill. On Monday, a meeting between ministers and civil society leaders on the Lokpal Bill had ended on a bitter note, with the activists accusing the government of not being serious about fighting corruption.
तो bureaucrats में भी constitution violate होता है, speaker, MPs में भी constitution violate होता है, judiciary में भी constitution violate होता है, तो फिर इसके दायरे में आएगा क्या?
So what is Anna Hazare and Baba Ramdev really campaigning for? To general masses in India, his courageous display of moral outrage represents a crusade against corruption. This at a time when the ruling UPA government is not only facing the flak for several scams that have surfaced in the past 1 year, and also its inability to act firmly against the perpetrators. No wonder their fasts have become a potent symbol of protest against dishonesty for angry Indians. But even when, with this newfound vigor that the civil society is raising its voice, the question that we ask, is the Jan Lokpal Bill the real answer?
अब खाएंगे नहीं तो काम कैसे होगा?
आप बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहे हैं सर।
हाँ तो लाइए।
हाँ तो सर लीजिए।
क्या है?
खाइए खाइए सर, ठाट से खाइए।
A crusade against corruption, a demand for a separate legislation to deal with it. One that has become a clarion call for citizens now raising their voice, both on the streets and on the web. A demand for which 73-year-old Anna Hazare has become the face. The Jan Lokpal Bill, a drastically modified version of the original Lokpal Bill that the Government of India plans to introduce. One that seeks to set up a body to investigate accusations of corruption against individuals and institutions within the government and public servants around the country. However, the irony is, majority of these newfound supporters are probably not even aware of the precise nature of Hazare's demands. The Gandhian is actually calling for a drastically revised version of the government's proposed Lokpal Bill.
हम ये नहीं चाहते कि कल ये लोकपाल बिल लागू होना, इसके लिए समय लगेगा, ये हम जानते थे। इसका ड्राफ्ट बनाने में करीब 3-4 महीना लगेगा, लेकिन कम से कम आप जॉइंट कमेटी तो कराओ, लेकिन पंतप्रधान का कोई मैसेज नहीं।
An alternative version of this bill, dubbed as the Jan Lokpal Bill, has already been drafted by some prominent members of the civil society. These include former Union Law Minister Shanti Bhushan, former IPS officer Kiran Bedi, Justice N. Santosh Hegde, renowned advocate Prashant Bhushan, and former Chief Election Commissioner of India James Lingdo. And what does this alternative bill actually propose? Perhaps the most striking aspect is that it seeks to virtually bypass the involvement of the government in the process of creating the Lokpal body. The selection committee that it envisages would include, among others, all Nobel laureates of Indian origin, the last 2 Magsaysay Prize winners of Indian origin, 2 of the senior-most judges of the Supreme Court and High Courts of India, and Bharat Ratna awardees. Interestingly, the administration too would get a representation in the form of the chairpersons of the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, the Chief Election Commissioner, and the Controller and Auditor General of the country. Clearly, this version sees no role for the people who have been democratically elected to govern the country. Many thus say that it indirectly sends a wrong message, one that could run deep, that adopting such a system would mean acknowledging the failure of democracy. Critics also say it proposes to install a vigilante body that can act on its own discretion in terms of what and whom to investigate and has police powers to prosecute perceived transgressors. There may be a naive idealism behind the demand and the agitation, but some also fear the consequences of the sweeping power that such a body may enjoy. After all, behind such idealism is the idea that members of the Lokpal will be perfect citizens and with no agenda other than weeding corruption out. Therefore, the apprehension that with no checks and balances, what's the guarantee that such a body won't turn into a motivated witch-hunting mechanism? The wheels of the administration may grind at an frustratingly low pace, but then it also reduces the chance of the kind of arbitrary persecution that India saw during the emergency period. So the question is, are democratically elected institutions no longer effective in running this country? The extreme measures proposed in this people's version are definitely a measure of the unhappiness, frustration and anger within the civil society at what appears to be a tacit complicitness of the government in corruption. Thus, it's evident it's not the process that has failed, but it's people who have failed the process. And it is when the people whom we elect fail to deliver that protests become necessary and corrections are demanded. The other big story this week in India, eminent human rights activist Binayak Sen on Monday reiterated his demand for the repeal of sedition laws in the country. Speaking to media in Mumbai, Sen said that the law was being used to suppress the voices of people. Sen is currently out on bail after being convicted on charges of sedition by a Chhattisgarh court for alleged links to the Naxals. He said his organization, PUCL, will soon launch a nationwide campaign against sedition laws in India.
Signature campaign করব সেটা আমাদের PUCL এর অর্গানাইজেশনে বিভিন্ন প্রত্যেক স্টেটে সেই স্টেটের PUCL আছে সেই দেশব্যাপী আমরা আন্দোলন সিগনেচার ক্যাম্পেইন কালেক্ট করব 10 লক্ষ সিগনেচার নিয়ে আমরা পার্লামেন্টে উইন্টার সেশনের সময় গিয়ে পার্লামেন্টে আমরা এটা পার্লামেন্টকে আমরা এটা প্রেজেন্ট জানাবো।
And I too caught up with the man himself to speak about his views on how the Indian government should deal with the basic problem of deprivation among the poorest of the poor.
We are now joined by Mr. Binayak Sen, renowned human rights activist, somebody who has been given a reprieve, given bail by the Indian Supreme Court recently. He was, remember, he was charged with sedition by the Chhattisgarh government, and the Chhattisgarh court had given him life imprisonment. Government of India wants you to be a member of a panel of the Planning Commission. How would you react to this entire dichotomy? Do you think that there's a difference in within the government how to deal with this entire issue?
No, I don't think that there is. I think that the Chhattisgarh government functions autonomously and the central government functions autonomously. I don't think they coordinate their activities in any way. So I'm not surprised that I mean, of course, it's a great honor to be offered to be nominated to the committee of the Planning Commission, but I don't see any contradiction between that and being charged with sedition by the Chhattisgarh government.
But it seems like there's a lot of displeasure among the Chhattisgarh government at this point, because Chief Minister Raman Singh has written to the Prime Minister, in fact, and taken exception to you being present in that panel. Would you like to react to that?
That's between Mr. Raman Singh and the Planning Commission. I didn't ask for a appointment to the committee of the Planning Commission, and so that Mr. Raman Singh will have to sort it out with the Planning Commission. I have nothing to do with that.
But sir, you have been saying that the entire problem lies in the fact that there's unequitable distribution of government services in a large section of the people, the cause of the deprivation. You believe that is the main issue. If at all you decide to be in that panel, would you like to raise that? Because it would be you're in a way you are indicting the government for its failure to reach the masses.
Well, it's not I who have been saying these things. The World Health Organization had formed a committee on the social determinants of health, and that committee came out with its predominant recommendation that inequity is killing people on a grand scale. So obviously one of the important measures that need to be taken in order to reduce the kind of pathology in society is to increase the amount of equity in it. So, and this has been borne out by many other recent findings, such as the multi-point development index that has the reports of the rankings developed on the basis of the multi-point development index also bear out this the idea that inequity is a major problem. So, I think that the idea that we need to have universal access to healthcare, the idea that we need to have a well-fed, well-nourished population, and that we need to take whatever economic and political measures are necessary in order to have a well-nourished population. The idea that people need clean water to drink, these are all very fundamental ideas. It's just that the government hasn't put its stress where it should be, and they have instead been spending the money on infructuous measures.
Many say that probably one reason why the government has not been able to reach to these huge masses of people suffering from deprivation, they cite another reason is corruption, and we have seen the kind of agitation that went throughout India on the streets of Delhi, led by Anna Hazare. You also believe that corruption is endemic to this system, and probably that is one of the biggest reasons why government services have not been able to reach to the masses.
Corruption is certainly an extremely large and important problem, but it's not the only cause. For instance, in the area of health, the government spends 1% of its GDP. It is now trying to spend up to 3% of the GDP. It's trying to increase the expenditure to 3% of the GDP, but it's having a great difficulty in doing that because they lack the infrastructure in order to absorb that increase of funds.
Right.
So I think that we really need the insight into what constitutes genuine improvement, a genuine increase in well-being in society. It is, I think it's as much as anything else, it's a philosophical problem.
Right.
That the people are not able to appreciate the kind of importance that equity should occupy in a society which is guided by a constitution which says that every state activity should increase the amount of equity in society.
Well, that was eminent human rights activist Binayak Sen speaking to us on TV South Asia as to what should be the approach of the government. He's citing a paradigm shift that the government needs to assume at this point in time to reach out to the masses that he says are deprived.
Let's now shift focus to Bangladesh, where the big story this week, in a landmark decision, the Bangladesh government has planned to scrap a crucial constitutional provision to stage general elections under an interim non-party caretaker government. However, the main opposition BNP has rejected the proposition, thereby visibly exposing the country's politics to fresh volatility.
Bangladesh has planned to scrap a crucial constitutional provision to stage general elections under an interim non-party caretaker government, a proposition that was rejected by the main opposition, visibly exposing the country's politics to fresh volatility. A special parliamentary committee on Tuesday reached a decision to abolish the caretaker government system, this in line with a recent judgment of the country's Supreme Court. The committee in fact obtained a nod from Sheikh Hasina to scrap the constitution provision after a marathon meeting with the Prime Minister. On Tuesday itself, the Prime Minister had said that there was no option to keep the provision alive after the Supreme Court declared it illegal. Earlier, co-chairman of the Constitution Review Panel, Suranjit Sengupta, said that the matter would be finalized in Parliament. Sengupta had also urged the opposition to give its opinion soon. However, the BNP did not respond to the committee's formal invitation to sit with it for talks on the 15th Amendment to the Constitution. Although the committee was supposed to present its report in the current Parliament session, the opposition has been boycotting it for long and had declined to join the parliamentary committee as well. Thus, soon after the Prime Minister spoke her mind, the BNP was quick to reject the proposal. However, notwithstanding BNP's objections, the ruling Awami League now intends to pass the resolution amending the constitution with its 3/4 strength in the Jatiyo Sangshad. The appellate division of the Supreme Court on 10th of May had declared the 13th Amendment to the Constitution as illegal, one that had introduced the existing caretaker government system but had also cleared ways to stage the next 2 general elections under interim regimes. The Apex Court had given Parliament the liberty to decide on the matter. A 6-member bench of the Apex Court, headed by Chief Justice ABM Khairul Haq, had ruled that the Constitutional 13th Amendment Act 1996 Act is prospectively declared void and ultra-virus to the Constitution. This while delivering verdict against the 2004 High Court judgment. However, the bench had also ruled that the next 10th and 11th parliamentary elections might be held under the existing caretaker governments to ensure safety of the state and its people. The appellate division judgment allowed the next 2 general elections to be held under the existing system following the age-old principles that suggest some otherwise unlawful things can be lawful because of necessity. Safety of the people is the supreme law, and safety of the state is the supreme law. After its formation on July 21st last year, the 15-member parliamentary committee, entrusted with the task of reviewing the charter, sat with Supreme Court judges, constitution experts, lawyers and newspaper editors to seek their advice. It also took the Prime Minister's opinion on 27th of April. Hasina had then suggested a fixed term for caretaker governments. She had also proposed that in case it failed to ensure elections within 3 months' time, the previous elected government shall be entrusted with the job.
সংবিধান সংশোধনের জন্য আমরা একটা সর্বদলীয় কমিটি গঠন করেছি এবং সেখানে আমরা
Bangladesh had amended the constitution, introducing the caretaker government system in 1996. After a protracted campaign of the then main opposition Awami League of incumbent Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, while the then ruling BNP was initially opposed to the idea. The Awami League at that time feared that elections under BNP government would be rigged under the influence of the incumbent regime.
However, the main opposition Bangladesh National Party outrightly rejected the government's latest move and called a nationwide hartal on Sunday. And while many have criticized the move, saying that it may amount to contempt of court, the BNP clarified that it was protesting against the government and not the judiciary. So those were all the big stories that made headlines in the past 1 week, but that's not all. There were a few more that made news this week. Let's quickly check them out.
Dreaded Pakistani terrorist Ilyas Kashmiri, wanted by both India and the United States, has reportedly been killed in a US drone attack in South Waziristan along the Afghanistan border late on Friday night. The outlawed group Harkat-ul-Jihad al-Islami or Haji has confirmed the death of its leader and commander-in-chief. This in a statement faxed to Pakistani media organizations on Saturday afternoon. However, security officials still remain circumspect as the veracity of the fax could not be established. Kashmiri is wanted in India for his role in a number of terror strikes in the country, including the 2008 Mumbai attacks. India and Germany on Tuesday said the two nations will work hard in advancing reforms of the United Nations Security Council and pledge to cooperate both bilaterally and within the G4. This during German Chancellor Angela Merkel's meeting with Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. The German leader was on a state visit to India this week. The two leaders also discussed the security situation in the region and India's role in rebuilding Afghanistan. With international troops set to hand over security responsibilities to Afghanistan forces by 2014, Kabul and New Delhi on Wednesday resolved to step up bilateral defense cooperation. This during the visit of Afghanistan Defense Minister General Abdul Rahim Wardak to India this week.
There is a very genuine interest on strengthening our relations in all different sectors, including defense.
In his meeting with the Afghan counterpart, Indian Defence Minister A.K. Anthony assured that India was committed to building the capabilities of Afghan security forces and reiterated its support in rebuilding the war-ravaged country. Top Afghan security official General Dawood was killed in a suicide attack in North Afghanistan last Saturday. NATO's commander for the northern region, German Major General Markus Knipe, was also among the wounded. General Dawood was a former Deputy Interior Minister and a key figure in Afghan security forces' roadmap to the 2014 security handover. The Rawalpindi Anti-Terrorist Court on Monday declared former Pakistani military ruler Pervez Musharraf a proclaimed offender in the Benazir assassination case. Taking notice of FIA's Special Public Prosecutor's request, the judge declared Musharraf a proclaimed offender. Early in April, the prosecutor had requested the court to start such proceedings as arrest warrants could not be served as the former military leader was willfully avoiding them. The Pakistani all-rounder Shahid Afridi announced his retirement from all international cricket on Monday. Afridi said he was dejected after being replaced as one-day captain following a spat with coach Waqar Younis. Afridi also slammed the Pakistan Cricket Board, which had criticised the all-rounder for speaking out against coach Younis during the recent tour to West Indies.
Martin Dempsey is one of our nation's most respected and combat-tested generals.
And US President Barack Obama on Monday nominated Army General Martin Dempsey as the new US military chief. Dempsey would now replace Admiral Mike Mullen as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff once he steps down on October 1st.
Indeed, it was an eventful week, and it was our endeavour to give you a comprehensive roundup so that it helps shape the new week for you. Do catch us next week, same time, same channel. Till then, goodbye.